Okay, we're live. We're going to check out the Power and Politics panel. Recent, obviously, a very big day in Canadian politics. Here we go. This is CBC, Power and Politics.
Mark Carney has reached a trade deal. Prime Minister Mark Carney has reached a trade deal with China, and in exchange for letting a limited number of Chinese-made electric vehicles into Canada, China will trim or remove its tariffs on some Canadian agriculture products. Carney was asked today whether China has become a more predictable partner than the United States.
Our relationship, the one comparison I will give you with the United States, our relationship, this is no insight, is much more multifaceted, much deeper, much broader than it is with China. But yes, in terms of the way that our relationship has progressed in recent months with China, it is more predictable, and you see results coming from that.
Today's deal between Canada and China did not go unnoticed in the United States.
That's pretty incredible. More predictable than the U.S. I mean, there's probably not been that many times in recent history where you could even argue that that would be true, but it's kind of true now, I suppose. I mean, yeah, I'm a conservative guy, but I don't know if I even disagree. What is Canada supposed to do?
But initial reaction was mixed.
How do you see the deals Canada and China have just signed, trade deals between the two partners?
Well, it's okay. That's what he should be doing. I mean, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that.
With China. I actually think that statement from Trump, I expected that statement. I did not think he was initially going to throw a fit over this. What does Trump think other countries are going to do? I mean, I don't know. Maybe Trump wanted this in some way. Who knows? But actually, I heard about this clip earlier. This is CNBC here.
I think it's problematic for Canada. There's a reason why we don't sell a lot of Chinese cars in the United States. It's because we have tariffs to protect American auto workers and Americans from those vehicles. The Canadians were trying to get some tariff relief on their own to get ag into there. I think in the long run, they're not going to like having made that deal.
And there are also mixed reviews here amongst Canada's political leaders. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is calling it good news for the country. He joined Carney on the two-day trip to China. But Ontario Premier Doug Ford says this will hurt Canada's auto sector and harm Canada's relationship with the United States.
Doug Ford is... I dislike Doug Ford actually more than any politician I think in Canada right now who's prominent. I think Doug Ford would be at the bottom of my list. It would have been Trudeau, of course, but he's not really, well, he's not in politics anymore.
This was not thought out properly. It wasn't consulted. It was a knee-jerk reaction as far as I'm concerned, and this is going to be a big problem. It's going to tick off the Americans at 80% of...
It's going to tick off the Americans. Weren't you the guy that ran the massive ad in America calling out the tariffs? And I believe got Mark Carney to apologize for that. What do you care about ticking off the Americans?
Our autos are going down there. So it's just a terrible miscalculated decision by the Prime Minister.
And there are also security concerns that come with deeper cooperation with China. In a statement, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said Prime Minister Mark Carney must explain how he has gone from saying China was Canada's biggest security threat before the election to announcing a strategic partnership with Beijing after the election. Here's that clip from the Mark Carney last spring.
I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
China, you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
But let's import a bunch of their cars. The thing is, my honest opinion on the Canada-China deal, I have some mixed feelings on it. I think a lot of the conservatives just went straight to this is a terrible deal, like the big conservative leaders online, or at least in the online influencer space. But I don't really know what we're supposed to do as Canadians. I still think top of mind for Canada, top of the list would be build the pipeline and tell the rabid environmentalists to shut up for a long time, like tell them just to leave politics. That would still be number one. Just stop all the insane anti-growth, anti-economic growth, I guess, policies domestically there are in Canada. DEI, I would add to that list. That's definitely still a thing in Canada. But in terms of this deal with China, I mean, I don't know. The specifics, I think, are going to be where it matters. Like, is China going to use this as a way to kind of like unethically spy or things like that? Obviously, I'm anti that.
Time to bring in our party insiders to go through all of this. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial advisor. Fred Delory is a
Hey, Dave, how's it going?
former Conservative campaign manager, and Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. Okay, Greg. Doug Ford is mad at Mark Carney. Lana Payne is mad
Do you
at
like this deal today, Dave?
Mark Carney. Scott Moe and Daniel Smith are happy with Mark Carney and offside with Pierre Poilievre on the news today. What did this trade deal do to politics in the country? It's all topsy-turvy.
Thanks for the balance. I mean, I was anticipating glass, half empty, rounds of defense and not looking at the positive. But, I don't want to define this by winners and losers, because I don't think a lot of things are finished yet in terms of other sectors. But look, I'm from Nova Scotia. I saw a couple of years ago when...
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you, Dave. Like, I know a lot of the sort of more partisan, I guess, conservatives online are very against this deal. I'm not sure that I am. I don't know. I'd have to look at more of hopefully we'll learn more about the specifics, I guess, but just the base deal, like the swap for electric vehicles or agriculture product. I mean, I don't mind that if as long as these cars that come over here, these BYD cars, aren't like bugged with a bunch of spy crap, obviously.
Trudeau cabinet ministers were promoting lobster. Politicians and commentators from the West really being critical of that. Huge lack of understanding about something that's really an important commodity in Atlantic Canada. So having the tariffs gone on lobster is going to be huge for that region. We spoke last week about how Scott Moe was being added to the trip, and he had been there previously with the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Secretary, Cody Boyce. So that seemed to be an indication that there might be something on canola. But as you said, there's a situation here. You've got the Premier of Alberta happy about the MOU, and Conservative Albertan Conservative MPs unhappy. And then you've got the Saskatchewan Premier happy about this. And I'm glad that Michael Chong is going to be talking to you and is talking to you about this, because just doing a check of random Conservative MPs on Twitter, it's scattershot about what this means. So I don't think we can really look at the opposition right now, the official opposition. And I think we look to what the Premier say.
But Mark Carney's best buddy at the Premier's table.
That is a good point. There are a lot of mixed reviews in Canada about this. One person, Tristan Hopper of the National Post, pretty big voice online, I'd say he hates this. He seemed to be having somewhat of a meltdown. I like him. I'm not saying that to make fun of him, but he was very upset on Twitter today.
He is mad.
Yeah.
Right? Like Doug Ford.
I don't know who he's talking about. Doug Ford, I guess.
Ford is mad, and that's got to matter.
So here's what I'll say on Doug Ford. I'm watching that clip, and he's in a parking lot in a scrum. It's time for Doug Ford to sit down with someone like you or Rosie or another channel, have a sit-down interview. I'm tired of seeing the Premier of the province I live in do these, fly past of reporters. Sit down and tell us what's wrong with this deal.
Good point. Good point.
Down.
Am I going to turn into a liberal? No, I'm not. But is this channel going to be a pro-Carney liberal YouTube channel? I'm kidding. That probably won't happen. But there's still so many things I disagree with him on. But
I think $5 billion announced for the Strategic Response Fund that could be for auto. There's $10 million just for EV in southwestern Ontario. Sit down with somebody, Premier Ford, and tell us exactly what's wrong and what you want to see. Because
all these people should be doing that. I'd like to see that with Poilievre. I'd like to see that from a lot of people.
Instead, I just feel like I get talking points in front of reporters in the parking lot.
Well, Fred, I mean, the whole idea, there were a couple ideas behind the EV tariffs in the first place. Get alignment with America and the European Union, because they were all doing this, but also to stop the overcapacity capabilities of the Chinese car makers from just flooding the market and undercutting the Canadian industry. They're now coming back in at a limited level, and there's talk of expanding manufacturing in here, and the concern is the industry that's on life support may have new competition. I mean, what do you make of this dynamic that's emerged?
Look, again, if the cars that come over here aren't loaded up with spyware, which I guess I'll assume they're not going to be, they'll be checked. And hopefully a very like deep way or whatever, a thorough way by Canadians. Why am I supposed to be mad about this? I don't personally work in the auto sector. I get if you work in that industry, you're probably not thrilled about this, but that's not everybody. You can't make all policy for the entire country based on individual sectors all the time. I mean, maybe that's, I don't know why I'm supposed to think that this could be bad if there's a prospect that Canadians who need a break badly potentially can buy some vehicles for cheaper. Again, I probably have a take on this whole deal that's a little against the grain maybe from a right-wing person.
Over the last 12 hours or so since this all got announced.
This is a very difficult country to manage when we're this large and diverse, and we have so many diverse industries that are so disconnected from each other. And when you have to make trade deals, some industries are going to be negatively impacted. And the Prime Minister had to balance that. He had to make a decision that he made. I don't know what calculation that was, to give up something to get something else. And I'd say the Premier was quite clear on where his concerns are with the trade to the U.S. 80% of cars that are made here are sold in the U.S. And if there's issues with that being blocked now, that is going to be problematic for that industry. So again...
Yeah, but Doug Ford cannot be we don't need to tick off the American guy. He's been ticking off the Americans. Obviously, Trump's been trolling Canada for quite some time, but Doug Ford has not been Mr. Let's hold hands and get along. Ford thinks Ontario is a country. Probably. I mean, Ontario is massive, but still. Ford, he does strike me as a guy that thinks he's more important than he is.
We're in a very challenging spot, forced into it because of the relationship with the U.S. and what they've done here, opening up or canceling CUSMA or saying we don't need it anymore. Canada does need to diversify trade. China is our second largest trading partner and the second largest economy in the world. So it makes sense to be talking to them. How all this flushes out though and what this looks like. I know there's a lot, we talk about the lobster thing. It was lowered, tariffs still exist, and it's only for 9 months apparently. So
then we'll see, right? But I guess the EV...
I think the thing I might like the most of this is at least Canada did something. That's a terrible attitude to have, especially at a national level like this. But my entire life, Canada has been doing basically nothing. It's been getting involved in more globalism, being way obsessed with climate change, apologizing for stuff. Maybe I just feel like finally Canada has done something. And for the majority of my life, my adult life, it's been Liberals in power. So I've not really even got to see that much of a conservative government doing things. Maybe when I was like 19 and stuff like that.
Access goes away if the tariffs come back, potentially, right? Trade-off here. Yeah, so Mel, I wonder about this because like Ford, I mean, he was mad when he was speaking today. I don't know if you saw the interview we did, Lana Payne. She is quite worried about her workers, including the 7,000 who are furloughed at car plants. Where do you think this leaves things? Because the main beneficiaries of this deal today are in parts of the country that do not vote for the Liberal government. So it's interesting that a Liberal Prime Minister chose to cut a deal that helps really the prairies that vote heavily conservative.
It's funny, what I've heard often today that I think is something to pay attention to is trying to get away from a bad deal with the U.S. by making a bad deal with China isn't the way that we diversify trade in a way that'll benefit people. I do think, though, based on, we talked about this last week, based on polling that we've seen, I think Canadians are hopeful that Mark Carney does some of those conversations, and that may look a little bit different. I think what we saw today, it would have been better if there were guarantees on the other side. So what kind of investments are they making here? What is it tied to jobs here in Canada? I think that would have been a little bit different.
It seems too preliminary for that based on the way this is being described, at least in
the
it's
fact
a framework,
that there's
right?
numbers on their end and no numbers on our end, like that to me is if you're going to guarantee on our side.
That's a good point. I saw in the deal, they didn't sound like they were really committing yet, which is very concerning. It said Canada expects these things by March 1.
Can you get guarantees on the other side? I think that's one of the questions. I hear your criticism about Premier Ford in the parking lot. I'm just glad that he's talking, period. But what I thought was interesting is, he talked about how this is just going to upset the Americans. I think his commercial probably did that. So the fact that you're kind of saying both
She said what I said. Let's go. Look at me agreeing with an NDP person.
Things is a little bit interesting and perhaps not genuine to the thing. But
let's go. What am I agreeing with all these leftists? I'm a leftist today.
The other opportunity is, why didn't he go to China with the prime minister? Maybe there was an invite there. I can't imagine there wasn't. I don't know why you weren't there having conversations at the table instead of finding out about this afterwards. No?
No, I'm going to guess I might not have advanced the conversation because, like, Scott Moe is there to get tariff relief for his main industry. If Doug Ford is there and they're letting Chinese companies come into the market, what does that do, right?
Like, that's
my question.
Fair enough. Anyways, I would have liked to have a seat at the table if I was going to, you want to be able to advocate on behalf of people. That the main...
You can't invite everybody, though.
Point, though, being is we continue to see the Prime Minister talk about support for industries without necessarily talking about support for workers. And these auto workers in Ontario have been the ones who were attacked by the U.S. for months now, and now you're having to deal with this too. So continuing to have our workers carry the bag and be the ones impacted.
That's true. That's probably true. If you're an auto worker, I didn't even think about that before. The statements earlier. If you're an auto worker, you've probably been kind of beat up for a while now. At least in the media, at least rhetorically.
By these tariffs, regardless on if it's the U.S. tariffs or this new trade deal with China, I think is a bad message. And I think it's dangerous to let that feeling of the Prime Minister's not standing with working people in this country grow. I think that's where we got, and Prime Minister Trudeau had to go. So I would just be mindful of what that looks like when you're announcing these things, because that's the message that a lot of working people in Ontario got today.
Well, in Ontario, but like to Greg's point, like fish harvesters back home and on the West Coast, if you're a farmer or work on a farm, and grow canola and all the other grains that are being hit by this. I mean, 90% of the canola in the country, $4 billion or so goes to China. So there's a dependency challenge there that they need to deal with. But Greg, Doug Ford is mad because he felt blindsided. Industry, you talked today, they had no idea what was coming, and even though it affected them. And the big worry, certainly in the car sector, when I spoke to people today, was how's the U.S. going to react, right? Because their hatred for China and their EVs. Trump, I mean, I know this is a fool's errand, but what did we make of that? It wasn't an immediately hostile deal, reaction to the deal, but who knows where it goes next.
You interviewed Peter Armstrong earlier, and on Twitter...
What is Trump supposed to say? I think it would have looked really ridiculous if Trump would have thrown a fit, especially right off the bat when, like, what are other countries supposed to do?
Had posted that clip, and my thoughts were 3, 2, 1 because we were the same way on the tariff ad. Mel makes a good point that it was Doug Ford's ad, which I have defended. That actually the reason why we're the discussion stopped ostensibly, according to the president, was because of that ad. So there's I think Premier Ford might want to.
I heard another point. I think from a different interview. I think that. If you buy one of these Chinese BYD cars in Canada, are you even going to be allowed to drive that into America? I kind of doubt it.
Think about that.
Like meeting on a vacation or something.
But the other thing just about expectations, when my guess is that when Scott Moe was announced as going, there was enough preliminary discussions that they thought they were going to have.
They've been kind of signaling it a little bit, right? Don't you think?
I spoke in February of 2025 at an industry association that included canola farmers. This was February of last year, and they were flagging it at that event during the Q&A part. So I can only imagine on the industry side and through their government what they've been saying on this. So I do want to make sure that we see where a win is. I don't think what we're talking about today is not a hot take because we just have this information. But I would say once again, I mean, the voices of people like Flavio Volpe and Lana Payne are important voices in this country, and they've done a lot of good in terms of our relationship with the United States. And I would not imagine in any shape that their conversations with this government are over. I remind people to take a look at the budget and what's there for potential things for different industries that have been impacted negatively.
Yeah, well, Flavio Volpe will be on in the second hour of the show. Actually, we want to get his update on things as we now have more information on what's in this. But Fred, the notion is, the Chinese electric vehicles are going to come in, and I've got my notes. Talked to a few people today who were part of that briefing from the federal officials today. The 49,000 EVs that they're bringing in, a lot of them, they want them to be cheap. $35,000, which is affordable for an electric vehicle, and that's going to be the kind of...
Those vehicles, if you're a Chinese person buying them in China, they're about $10K. So cheap.
Target range.
Tesla sold in Canada come from various locations, primarily Gigafactory Shanghai for model. That's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. So really, so you're buying a car from China. That is cool.
Doing with the cars are going to allow to come in, and the hope is that this paves the way for Chinese investment in manufacturing in the automotive sector, either building the cars.
That's what I want to model. Maybe not the, is it Y, the one I want? Whatever's one up from Model 3. I think it's Model Y. I think that's one I want.
Building car parts. Do you think that's a politically sellable idea right now, given the past issues with China and the current troubles with the U.S.?
If jobs are needed and jobs are being created, I think that's where a lot of people will be looking. But I find it, hard to believe that they'll be manufacturing cars here. I think the way they're at the prices they are is because they're being able to manufacture them in China with different labor rules and different regulations that exist here in Canada. So I think it'd be more expensive for them to do it here. So it's almost like they would be shipping them to do that.
Battery plants and things like that, though. I wonder. Like, this is the goal, and this is what Doug Ford was talking about, right? Come build a plant here and build it here, and it's a different kind of argument.
At the end of the day, we are going into a decade of affordability issues. Like we keep calling it a crisis. It's not a crisis anymore. It's because it's going to be prolonged for so long. Crisis
existence.
It's existence, affordability, and when the economy is taking a downturn, we need jobs. So if there is someone coming to bring jobs, I think that is going to win over a lot of people.
So Mel, you were talking about how...
Thanks, Trudeau. Thanks for driving the country into the dirt.
The Prime Minister talks about supports for industry, but without necessarily for the individual workers. And what struck me today is that Michael Sabia and Dominic LeBlanc told the premiers they're working on a broader series of measures for the auto industry, and it's going to be announced in 2 to 3 weeks.
In 2028, BYD will have 2 plants in Europe. I didn't know that either. That's cool. So BYD is kind of becoming more of a global company. It looks like. So I guess there'll be Chinese cars all over the place. I have a feeling America will be a tough nut for them to crack. I don't see those vehicles being in America anytime soon. Just like I wouldn't see. I mean, I guess there would be Teslas, right? In China, there would have to be if they're making them there. That's an American car company, so maybe there'll be BYDs.
They've been waiting on that for a while. Decisions on the EV mandates, what are you going to do about charging infrastructures, tariffs, these sorts of things. What did they need to deliver on that? Because if you listen to Lana Payne today, it feels like the stakes of that raised quite a bit today with the China deal.
Absolutely. And we've been really bad, actually, at giving money to corporations to come here, but then we don't actually tie local jobs to either the building of those plants. I think of Stellantis as an example. We used to work with the iron workers, and they were bringing in temporary foreign workers to build that plant and then to work on the cars when they were here. So the ability to tie it to local jobs will be really important. And if you're unable to do that, well, we're kind of in the same place where you're not giving the ability to local workers to get those jobs. What will it take? I think genuinely, even the communication of talking about support for industries versus support for workers is already a massive difference in, okay, you're talking to me, you're going to be supporting me, versus I don't know how you supporting a big company is going to make its way to me. I find the communication of the thing really difficult.
If you work for that big company, don't you want to see them help the company? You know what I mean?
I don't think, I don't know that I think I'm getting help from that, right? I think my job is still on the chopping block if something goes bad, and I think that's what those workers' experience has been. They're not necessarily standing there saying, please help Ford. They're saying, how is this going to help me? Because they've seen the industry be hit, and they've seen those companies be hit, and they're always the first ones that have to deal with it, or they're put on. I forget the word. The
job sharing and furlough and all of these
furlough,
things.
Exactly. So at the first benefit to that company, if it benefits them, my job is on the chopping block. So figuring out what those ties are to actually support that workforce, I think that's what you need to do. And the more you talk about industry, the more you talk about sector, yeah, those things are important. Obviously, they're important to our economy. They're important to the stability of it all. But I don't actually know how that helps me. So figuring out how to talk to people in a way that they can understand that, okay, this is exactly how this is going to secure my job. This is exactly how I'm going to stop worrying about what's happening in the U.S., I think is massively important now more than ever with this announcement. The whole thing about,
Sure, but it's not nearly as important as just actually having a great economy, which Canada has not had in such a long time.
You saying Dominique Leblanc and Michael Sabio were telling folks today, that a plan is coming. If you knew you were going to China and you knew you were about to make this deal, you probably should have had that ready to go beforehand, or you probably should have been able to give Premier Ford, you should have been able to give Lana, you should have been able to give all of those folks some information ahead of time. And they would still be out today saying that they were disappointed, but it would be way less than this, and they'd at least be able to tell their people, this is what's coming to support us. So the fact that it's coming in a few weeks and it's not ready, I think that's disappointing.
I don't care about this, to be honest. Canada does that too much. Canada does way too much. Let me tell this person. Let me tell this other person. Let's all meet about this. Let's meet about this. Let's hire consultants to talk about this. Let's do this. I just do it. Then deal with blowback. Who cares? America does that way better than Canada. Not just Trump. Even when Trump's not in, America has been moving faster than Canada in many ways. Obviously, Trump, certainly for a politician, moves very quickly. Usually politicians are slow, so I have no problem that not everybody in Canadian politics was aware of this deal from Carney and China. Just do it. See what happens. You can always change things. The world can always change. You can always make new deals in the future.
Those folks do.
Yeah, Ford in his round to speak in the briefing today said there's no partnership here. He was, that's quite a statement to come from Doug Ford, given the role he's played in Canada-U.S. relations over the past year. But Greg, going back to this is a deal that has created alarm in Ontario broadly and relief. I know there's canola and grain farmers in Ontario. I'm not dismissing the agriculture sector here, but like mostly in the prairie provinces. Now, proves it's not really a political decision, right? That this is what you felt you could do, it seems, as the Prime Minister. But you have this pushback now from allies like Ford, like Lana Payne, and people who were there with you in the trenches, during the election last year. I mean, how do you respond to that and recalibrate on that politically? Because increasingly they're hearing about things more and more after the fact rather than being there at the early part of it.
So this is purely speculation on my part, but when I would use the example of when the Prime Minister went to the Oval Office and it was expected that they raised the expectations there'd be an aluminum and steel deal, and there wasn't. You have to remember that your audiences are not just the political ones, and it's not just Canadian media. The people that you're negotiating with or against are watching it as well. And China is especially difficult on this front. And one of the things last week going into our show, people I had talked to who had covered China was that they, even though there was not a lot of telegraphing of expectations of a deal, that there was an expectation from people who watched China very closely that the nature of this invitation and what they had planned, that there would be something significant around it. But the Canadian government smartly avoided raising expectations on that, because part of that is China is going to be watching that as you go into it. Yeah. And so, and I think, parts are still moving right up until the week of that you're traveling.
This point's kind of boring. Man, I really wish these panels, I'm going to sound like a broken record if I keep covering these. There's never disagreement. There should be disagreement. If you got a conservative there, a liberal, an NDP, the host, it would just be way better for disagreement. You don't have to shout at each other, but I actually think these panels being more entertaining would be good for Canadian democracy. It would just drive more eyeballs for people to understand issues more. It's just like kind of an interview with three different people.
Mel is saying about communicating this. I have family that work in Oshawa, Whitby, big part of the auto industry. But I think, I personally, I think if someone says that there's this support coming for this industry or this company, as a member of that, as an employee there, I'm going to think that's going to benefit us. We have secretaries of state for labor and we have ministers. That's their job to explain it.
Sure. Yeah, look, maybe some of this is sequencing, right?
See, they kind of disagreed there, but so politely, just the most Canadian disagreement, and then there's just no rebuttal.
Announce support for the auto sector on EV mandates, so you know what you're doing with Chinese EVs. You know, so that
You
would
can
be
still give a call to Doug Ford and tell him what's coming.
Totally. Yeah, I'm just trying to look at how it happens, the machinery behind the scenes. But you know, Fred, on Greg's point that there's multiple audiences when you're dealing with something like this, and you know, you want to have your proxies speaking on your behalf, and Ford and Lenape in the past have been that. Today, not so much. A big audience here is the United States, right? Kirsten Hillman, the ambassador, briefed Jameson Greer on this early this morning to give him the broad outline, but the Associated Press, or the fake news Associated Press, to use the White House's phrase, they framed this as Canada's breaking with the U.S., right, on the EVs with China. And then the Prime Minister, in answering the New York Times questions in Beijing, said China right now is a more predictable partner than the United States. I mean, Trump wasn't mad, but does that hold?
Exactly. I want to come back to that. Trump's presser today, when he asked that question, he was very.
I don't even know if Trump would disagree with that. What is Carney and Canada supposed to do? And I don't think Trump, I don't know this for sure, but I doubt he would respect a pushover country who just kind of sits around and waits by the phone for him to call back.
Trump said they'd make sense.
I think, you know what I mean? I honestly think that's in Trump's nature. I think he likes the competition. Oh, there's a deal with China and Canada. I'll try to make a better deal. Or how does that affect my future deals with China, with Canada, with other countries? I don't know. That's just a guess, kind of based on Trump says he likes to make deals. I bet you he likes the moving pieces on some level from the game aspect of it.
He would, you know, that he sees why we would do that. I remember him saying the exact same thing. We talk about the Ford commercial.
Yeah.
He said the exact same thing. He said it was a
Proud.
good ad.
I would do the same
He would have
thing.
done the same thing.
Yep.
And 3 days later, he woke up and had a very different opinion and shut down negotiations.
Maybe he said, you know, if I would do it, it must be bad. You know, maybe that's sort of the thought
Said
process.
that, not me.
No, but it shifts, right? Nothing is set in
Exactly.
stone.
That's
right?
why, you know, he said that now. Let's see in a couple of days, Monday, Tuesday, what his reaction to this is. I think Premier Ford is probably going to be accurate. He's going to be right in this and predicting that there is going to be a lot of anger coming out of the White House on this. What that looks like and what it means, I mean, how does it get worse? I don't know. We keep talking about Kuzma being torn up.
Yeah.
And then tariffs still here. So I don't, you know, where are we going with this and how long is this going to continue?
See, like, they all basically agree on the panel. Liberal, NDP, conservative, and they all agree. Let's get a different take on there. Get someone on there that thinks what Carney just did with China is the worst thing. Why not represent that point of view? That's not even really my point of view right now, because it's not, truthfully, but there's a lot of Canadians right now who are totally mad that China now, or Canada and China, are getting closer together. Get somebody on there with that point of view who says, oh, like, Carney totally blew this by not negotiating with America, who's by far our largest trading partner. And now you're going to go to China and do this. Like, get someone on there with that point of view. But that's obviously not been CBC's pattern to want to do that. They seem to want 3 people on a panel or whatever that basically agree, only very on minor things might have small disagreements.
You know, the White House did do its own sort of de-escalation with China last fall on rare earths and soybeans and these sorts of things. So it was an agriculture sector where they did do a tariff deal with China and a bit of a reset. So, you know, this sort of follows along that line. But Mel, I just wonder, what do you make of it was quite the phrase from the Prime Minister today. Like, China is predictable.
Yeah.
You know, and that they'll act in their own self-interest. And America is not predictable right now, the United States of America.
Right.
But what do you make of the Prime Minister sort of saying that out loud to the New York Times?
Out loud, for sure. I think I saw.
Is China predictable, though? I don't really think that would be true. I mean, just look at the recent history between China and Canada. I don't know about that.
Satire headline today that said Canada chose lawful evil versus chaotic evil. And I think that that's how people are feeling, right? If again, go back to the polling, people...
That's Trump derangement syndrome. And they all laugh. Like, I think they all on some level would agree with that. That's Trump derangement syndrome. Evil, I'll give you chaos. But the fact that that's just a given, no wonder Trump trolls Canada. He should. If that's what he sees with our biggest media company, the one that's sponsored the most through tax dollars, oh, Trump's chaotic evil. Trump's probably like, well, then go screw yourselves, Canada.
Entire headline today that said Canada chose lawful evil versus chaotic evil. And I think that that's how people are feeling, right?
She's not joking when saying that. That's pathetic.
Again,
that stuff helps nobody.
The polling, people thought that that China was less of an enemy and less harmful to Canada than the U.S. That's a massive shift from even just a year ago. So I think what is a benefit to the Prime Minister.
That's not how I read this. I read it as Carney making a trade deal. This is now basically the first time on the panel I strongly disagree with some statements. That's not what I think of this at all. I think of it, like I said, just Carney looking at the chessboard and making a move.
China was less of an enemy and less harmful to Canada than the U.S. That's a massive shift from even just a year ago. So I think what is a benefit to the Prime Minister is that I think a lot of folks, if you were to check their gut check on this, they're probably kind of aligned with him. I'm sure a lot of folks are worried or maybe concerned about this, but still optimistic or hopeful that this could be a good thing. On the flip side of what this does, with the U.S.,
yeah,
could be bad, but all we've seen is bad in the last year. I feel like every Friday we sit here and it's like, oh, it couldn't get worse. And it's like, oh my Jesus, it's worse again, or it's worse again. And oh my God, this thing is happening. So is it going to make things worse? Potentially, we see.
I don't know if things have really gotten that bad with the U.S. at all, really. Just rhetorically, yes, some tariffs, but Canada's economy is really in no worse spot than it was when Biden was in. In fact, it's kind of better. There's some optimism. The stock market, at least, which is not a perfect measure, it's up a lot in 2025 compared to a bunch of other years. So all the stuff with USA is still 99% just rhetoric.
Bad story after bad story coming out of the U.S. I'm hopeful that President Trump has some bigger issues to deal with right now. I don't think that he does. Right? I think this is the kind of stuff that he then uses to distract from his own domestic bad news stories. But yeah, it's probably going to upset him in a few days, and we're probably going to get a shot. But again, that is proof of the importance of diversifying our relationships and of not being so reliant to the U.S. My caveat there is I'm not sure that we should put all our baskets from the U.S. basket to the China basket.
No, you can't do that.
But again, I think if you were to check the pulse of Canadians, they would probably be like, I'm not sure, but you got to do something. So that's to the benefit of the Prime Minister.
And this is the bizarre thing about all of this, Greg.
That's just assuming that the majority of Canadians have TDS.
After the Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor, hostage diplomacy and everything over Meng Wanzhou, Canada arrested Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States because we have an extradition treaty. And years later, you're rewarded with threats of annexation and tariffs. And bizarrely, things are better.
This is a real point. This actually is a real, this is a real thing. This is not TDS. This is actually true.
And everything over Meng Wanzhou. Canada arrested Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States because we have an extradition treaty. And years later, you're rewarded with threats.
In 2018, too, I think. That was not that long ago.
Of annexation and tariffs. And bizarrely, things are better with China today because of this.
Yeah.
And maybe worse with the U.S. because of this or whatever else happens next.
I was thinking the exact same thing. When you played a clip from Prime Minister Carney in the spring, the one that I saw today around China was, it was an outdoor news conference. I think it's in March. And
yeah, 2018, that's right. Yeah, thank you.
The Prime Minister is talking about seeking new partners, and he talks about Asia, he mentions China, and what he says is, and I wish I could remember, sorry, I was cramming I thought we'd be talking about Quebec today, but the quote is around, we have to be very directed, and careful.
Limited in focus is kind of where he's going today, right?
Which is what he's been, but I was thinking, that was in March, when we thought we still had some sort of deals left with the United States, and as Fred pointed out, it was going pretty well until apparently somebody whispered in Trump's ear and said the ad is bad after he said that it was good. So it's really tough. I think about the amount of time that we've spent together since the fall of 2023 and what we're saying now about China, but to exactly your point, China has probably realized, despite that little dalliance in the fall, China has probably realized that there's an opportunity, or they have to be prepared because of the way America is acting, and they may have not been as open for doing this deal with Canada a year ago as well.
Look, I think the Prime Minister does need to explain a little bit how his thinking has evolved on China, because when he did say that in the debate, we were in it with the United States, right? And here we are now, and it doesn't mean you don't do this, Fred, but like an explanation of how you view it now and what your thinking is, that feels necessary.
Absolutely,
I think, point,
absolutely.
Right?
Look,
I think that would come across as a massive lie if you said your thinking has evolved. I think you just say we made a deal. We don't need to love China on everything.
Necessary.
Absolutely,
point,
absolutely.
Right?
Look, Canada's open for business should be his main message, which it appears to be, trying to diversify our trade. But when you are talking to partners like this, where 9-10 months ago, when was the campaign? 3 years ago?
He said it April 17th
Yeah.
in the middle of the English debate.
Like, that is a very solid, strong statement to make, and he is now, they are making deals.
Yep.
You have to explain that. You have to tell us what changed. If they're a security threat, why are you even there? If that's the largest security threat, maybe the security threat's gone. If that's it too, explain it to us. I don't know.
I mean, maybe you can do deals within certain guardrails, and that's just the way
And
it is.
explain
And
it
maybe
if so.
that's the answer.
That's what I hope he says, but
David, I ran into Anita Nan just before Christmas, and she said we are all trade ministers. And I think that kind of sums the big change.
Well, that's actually not a bad point. All right, we are out of time. I can't trade more.
okay, I'll finish the stream there. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe. Have a great day.